Hello, and welcome back to CSS Snackables Week 2. Today we're going to be looking at this payment form. Specifically, we're going to be styling this form, and then on the latter half of the video, we'll be implementing JavaScript to show the credit card type. So show the logo of the credit card that you've typed in, like Visa, MasterCard, Discovery, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to hop over to the terminal, and we're going to copy the boilerplate code to Week 2. Okay, now I'm going to cd into Week 2, and then we're going to open up an atom. Okay, so the boilerplate code is open, so let me just start running gulp here. All right, so I have the boilerplate code open. I've got what we're going to be doing today, the design of the payment form, and then I also have a window of our current code. So I'm just going to quickly change a few of these values here, so we can get rid of all that. All right, and then that's it. So let's just start doing some markup here for the payment form. So it's obviously, you have the full page here, and then you have this, it's almost like a modal, a floating kind of centered content area. So I'm going to just start out doing some HTML markup. We'll call it modal, and then inside of this, we're going to need to have another modal, and then we'll call this the container. And then it will have two columns. So the container will house kind of the border radius here that you see around this object, the box shadow. It also will kind of contain these two columns. So you have this one area here that's like a featured product, what you're buying, and then the payment form. So let's do two columns, and we can call it modal, and then maybe featured, and we'll just create some notes here. So actually we can do it. So we'll need a button, type button. And then we're going to add so insert left arrow icon. And then we're going to have a span tag here and add the class of visually hidden. This is kind of like a helper class so that screen readers can actually see, and we'll say go back to product page. Probably if you click this, it would go back to the product page for the product you're buying. And so this is just a screen reader, since this will be hidden on the page, and we'll just show the arrow icon. We want them to still be able to know what the button means. So this is for accessibility, and then we'll insert the product image here. And we'll probably also just need a div, and this will just be a circle. So modal circle, and this will just serve as the background for the image. So you could probably do it as like a before element, but I'm just going to do it as its own div, and it'll be for this circle that will go off screen, and we'll apply some overflow hidden on the featured div to hide the rest of the circle. All right, so the right column is going to be just the modal, we'll say content, and this will house a form. And in this form, actually before the form, let's do an h2 tag and a header 2, and we'll just say your payment details. That'll be the title. And then in the form, we're going to need a few things. I'm going to do a unordered list, and then in each list item will be like a row. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, and then we'll have a label. The label for the first one says name, and then let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see. Refresh. How do you make this bigger? Okay, so yeah, that's better. All right, so now we're gonna have an input type equals text, and then it's gonna be required, since all these fields will be required. Actually, I'll leave it blank. And then so we'll call it CC name, and then we'll copy this, and we'll do it 2 more times. So now we're going to say card number, and then we're going to just say CC number, and then we're going to also say expiration date. And then inside of here, what I want to do is I want to have I want to actually put these as input fields instead of selects. I think it's actually better user experience, but we're going to make a div, and inside that div, let's just clear all this stuff out. Inside this, I want to basically have one div, and inside of it have two columns, so one for the expiration date and then one for CVC. So we're actually going to redo this a bit. So let's put this inside the div, and then we'll call another div. I don't know the class for right now, and we'll just say input type text, and then we'll have two of these, and we'll say the name for the first is going to be CC month. Name for the second will be CC year, and then let's add some HTML5 validation. So we can say pattern, and it's going to be equal to a number, any length number. But then we'll also say min length is going to be, for year, would be 2, and then we'll say the max length will be 2. And then we can copy this over to the first one as well. So that way the browser will only allow minimum of 2, maximum of 2, and only numbers. So it'll be month, and then year. Let's actually add a placeholder so that the user would know. So month, year. And then, so we got a div here, and then we'll do another div. And inside this div, we're going to just have a label, and it's called CVC. And then we're going to need an anchor tag, and it's probably going to be like this. Inside of this anchor tag, we're basically going to be doing this question mark icon link. Usually what these sites do is if you click it, it will open a modal to explain what the CVC is, or an image. It could also maybe open some kind of inline thing. So if it's a modal, usually you'll have like an anchor tag, and then we'll say something like CVC modal, and then you'll give it a class of like modal open, then it hooks to the two. But we won't actually implement that in this video. I'm going to give it a button transparent. Pretty much it's going to be a SVG icon, and I don't want any like normal button styling. So it'll be a button transparent. And then we'll also just give it a class of button info, and we'll style the specific button to be an info button. That way, if you were to have a site that had multiple areas of where you had to have like an icon or a button like of this manner, you could just kind of have a global styling of button info. We're going to insert question SVG icon here. And then let's go here and give accessibility span tag and say something like, what is CVC? And then say visually hidden. Let me go and grab an icon here. Okay, so I got an icon from Nucleo Icons, I think it's called. We're going to scroll up to where we had the hidden button, and we're actually going to say also here, oops, not that, give it a class of button transparent, because it's just going to be this like arrow icon. And then we'll also give it a button of close. In this case, I'm going to also say just return to product page. I think that's a little bit better. Okay, and let me also close this sidebar. And then we're going to include this image source, and we're going to include an images/product.png. And we'll give it a class of modal product. I think it's a good time to maybe go and check on. So what we got? We got the name, credit card, expiration date, CVC. So we need to add now an input type of text, and then the name will be CC CVC, and then we'll give it a min length of 3, and then a max length of 4, since depending on if it's American Express or Visa, will be 3 or 4. And then we'll give it a placeholder of 1, 2, 3. then we can drag down the pattern so it's only numbers. Save that. All right, so now we can create a new list item, and this will house the agreement. Save my card for future purposes. That checkbox, and then if you agree to that. So inside of this, we're gonna have an input type of checkbox, and it'll be checked by default. And then we'll give it a name of CC save. And then after that, we'll have the text. So save my card for future purchases. And by wrapping it in this label, when you click on the text, it will click on the select. We can show that here. So if I, and it's kind of shady to have it checked by default. Honestly, I usually always uncheck it. I don't want the sites to save my credit card for, in case the site gets hacked and then all my credit card information gets released. All right, so I think we're doing pretty good here. Expiration date, CVC, all that. All right, so I think the only thing left now is the pay. So we'll add one more list item. We'll just have a button here, and it'll be a type of submit this time. And we'll give it a class, and it'll just be the global button class. So let's just say this is the primary button styling. Inside of here, we'll say pay now. All right, so one more class I want to add is on the unordered list. Let's give it a class of form list, let's just say, and we'll have a global form list styling. And then for every LI, actually not that one. For every LI, we'll say, okay, it is working. Form list and then row, and we'll close that. And so now we could start styling some of these items. And then actually, let's see. So in here, we actually have two divs. And we want these to be in line. So I'm going to give it one more helper class and call it form list row, and then a modifier class of inline. And you'll see in a second why. So I think we're pretty good here. One last thing is I want to add the image so that when we reload this, we will see the image. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed an image. This is not sponsored, but it's kind of similar to the one in the image example. So I'm just going to put this to the side here. I'm running out of room. Let's see. Let's resize this down a little bit. Refresh, okay. And then let's just put this over here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and start creating some files here. So the first thing is we're going to need a module, and it will be called modal. And then what I like to do is just put an empty modal tag here. And then what we can do is we can also create some core files. So usually in this, I'll put something like forms. I'll put another one called like common. And then I'll put another one for buttons. And I might even put one more for typography. We don't really have too much. So this is probably way overkill, but I'm just trying to show you what a normal project structure would be. And then for all, we'll go ahead and include all of them. So we have 3 cores, and then a module. So module / modal, and then all right, so I added all 3, and in this case, actually, I think it's good to think about like order. So common should probably be first, then you have typography, and then in case the buttons use any typography, like mix-ins or anything, then you have access to all that. And then we have modal at the end. All right, so now we can just go on over to var, and I'll copy in all the colors and then theme colors. All right, so I went ahead and picked out all the colors from the image, added them as theme colors, And so now we have the main colors, and then we have the theme colors. So we should only be using the theme colors in the CSS. That way, if you ever need to change, let's say what is light, what is lightest, what is primary, any of these colors, you can change these values and then not have to change it anywhere else in the code. So primary, accent, dark, info, all these colors. All right, so I went ahead and split the HTML to the bottom here so you can actually see it. And so what we want is we want the featured content and then the content itself to be displayed as two columns. So if you saw here, we have the container. Inside this container, we have these two divs. If I collapse them, it'll make more sense. So you have these two divs. So we could say in modal container, display flex, and then, okay, so I was just missing an S on modules. So I added that, and my SAS is building now. All right, so we hop back over to modal, and you can see display flex gives it a 2-column layout. All right, so now I want to style the outside part. So to do that, let's just say for modal, let's just give it a display of flex. And then let's just say that it has a height of 100 viewport heights, width of 100 viewport widths. So 100%, 100%. And then if it were to go over the screen resolution, since it's not going to be more than 100% of the browser width, we can just give it an overflow Y of auto. And then what we also want to do is we want to justify center and align center. And what this will do is it will align the container to the middle of the screen. And then we can also say something like, because it's display flex, let's actually position it as fixed, and then left of 0, top of 0. And the reason for that is this is a modal, so we want to just make sure it's all the way in the top corner. And then give it a z-index because in case anything else is over it due to the position of fixed. All right, so now to make all this stuff visible, I'm going to just give this a background color of white. And then I'm going to go hop over to the common, and I'm just going to say body, background color of, and I think it was light, or it was lightest. All right, and then we can give it a min height of 100 view height. All right, so now it's starting to come together. It's a little cut off here. So let's hop over back to the modal. All right, so I'm going to give it a max width of 675 pixels, and then a min height of 400 pixels. And then I think for now, that's probably good enough. We'll come back and fix up some of the box shadow and stuff later on. So let's go over and start to do the the left column. So we're going to give it a position of relative because we're going to be we're going to have some absolute positioned elements in there. So first thing I want to do is I want to give it a min width of 230 pixels. I'm also just going to give it some padding, 20 pixels, and we'll say overflow of hidden. And actually, I'll comment that out for now. And then I think that's good. So let's go on to the content, which is the left column, the right column. So for the right column, so we have flex 3, and then I'll just put here flex 1. So it will be relatively, I think that's good. It's about one third, I think, and then maybe a little bit more. This is like 40%, I think, and then this is 60%, something like that. So it's probably maybe like that. Flex 1, flex 2, and then we gave it a min width anyway, so it won't go below that. Great. So now, actually, I'm just going to say we gave this a class of product. So I just want to say that this was a max width of 100%. So you can see now that the max width 100% is being respected. So I think it's going to be a little hard now to see where we are. So let me just see. So a couple of things. We want to position this absolute so that it's always going to be at the top, and you won't see this cut off piece of the Beats headset. And then we also want to give a background color, or actually we want to do the circle. So let's give this a position of absolute, and then give it top, left, and then we can actually do 50% here, and then do a transform, translate X, and then say negative 50%. And whoa, what did I do? Okay, and then this basically just means center the product in here, in the center of the featured. You know what? Let me just do image, so you can see here. So inside of featured we have image, and we're just gonna use we absolute positioned it inside of here because it has position relative. So it will be this position absolute will be relative to the featured column, but we told it to go 50% from the left, and then this transform basically moves it almost like 25%. It moves it back negative 50%. It's like kind of like a hack to center your item when it's absolute. And then actually I wanted to say 85% here, I think. Okay, great. So now inside of featured, or actually rather, let's create a new one. We call it circle. It's going to be this like, if you look at this, think of it as this whole big circle, and then this is only a part of the circle that you see. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a circle. We're going to say position absolute. Let's just put it top left for now. We're going to reposition it later. I'll give it a background color of, I think I called it sun glow, but it was actually accent. So we'll do that. We have to give it a height. So 100% width, 100% height. So you can see now, great. So this is actually pretty good. We'll give it a border radius of 50%. So it's like a circle. Yeah, it's probably gonna be more of an oval, so that because this is rectangular. So let's actually give it width of 100% and then a height of 200%. No, so let's give it also width of 200%, and then we'll tell it from. We'll leave it top left of 0, and then we'll use transform. So for transform, because it's 200%, we can say something like translate on the x-axis. Go negative 50%. Okay, so now it's positioned right where we want it for the edge of this featured block, but the y is not correct. So now we can say translate y, and let's go up 25%. So now it's pretty much in the centered, and now all we have to do is we can just re-enable the overflow hidden on the featured, and it will cut off everything. An alternative would be you could also probably have another div inside of here, and then say overflow hidden for that, and then it would only cut off. Actually, let's do that so that we can have the headphones here. So let me just show you. For the circle, we're going to move all this to before. And then we're going to say overflow hidden. Width, percent, height, percent. Okay, and then we just want to give it content. And then I think we're going to position this actually absolute. Absolute. Like absolute vodka. All right, so top 0, left of 0. Great, and so now we have the background color that we had before, but what we've done is removed overflow hidden so that the headphone can kind of be displayed outside. And then what we can do in addition is we can just translate this, and let's just say minus 10 pixels, and put it inside of a calc since we have mixed units, percentages, and pixels. So now it's I think a little bit more centered here, and I think we'll just size it down a little bit because it's much larger than in the image here. Something like that I think is good. So I think it's it's a lot closer than it was. So now the only thing left in this section is that back button. So if we go back to the markup, you'll see that in featured we have button transparent and button closed. So let's make those classes. We have button transparent, and this is just going to be hiding the usual button styling. So we're going to say background transparent, border 0, and then any potential outline from our browser 0. And then button close. Okay, for this we're going to position absolute. We're going to say top 10 pixels, left 10 pixels, and then we're going to display flex, align items centered, justify the content centered, and let's also give it a z-index of 10. Okay, so now we can see it. I gave it centered here because that way the circle will be, the icon will be in the middle. And what I want to do is I actually want to say on hover, using the hover mixin, give it a background color of white, and then give it a color of accent, so it kind of swaps. So you can see here, oh, nope, I need to actually, here, this is what I could do. So I could say, this is an SVG. We can say for all paths and elements inside of here, there's only one in this case, but if it had more, you would just say fill current color. So we'll give this a color of white. And then we'll also just say with 20 pixels, height 20 pixels, and that way it's a little bit smaller and it matches more of that arrow. So now if we go hover over it, you can see has that, and then that's okay. But I'll give it a border radius of 50%. Border radius of 50%. And then we'll give it a width of 30 pixels and a height of 30 pixels. Let's move both these values up a little bit right here. And now if we hover over it, you can see nice. I also just want to add one more thing. Let's add a box shadow, and we'll give it 3 pixels down and to the right with a 20 pixel spread, and then let's use black. And then like 0.1, like very subtle. Over it, very subtle. We got a little box shadow. All right. So that's done with the close button and this whole section here. Okay, so now for the form, we want to start doing some typography styles. So I'm going to bring in Google Fonts, specifically Open Sans. So I'm going to scroll up, add Open Sans to the top here. And then I'm going to also just go to Common, open up this body tag and say Font Family, Open Sans with fallback to Sans Serif. Okay, so now the font is Open Sans. And then we're going to start to style this form. So if you look here, let's actually close the featured and open up content. So in content, we have the H2, and then we have this form with a UL of form list. So let's go into the form styling. We can close common, and then we can close the buttons. So let's have forms. We're going to call it form list, and we'll give it a list style of none. Let's see. Oh, we forgot to include it. Okay, so we got that included now. So form list style of none, padding left of 0, margin 0. So we're just gonna reset all of that. And we'll go actually back to the content here for the modal. And let's give it padding top and bottom 20 pixels and then 30 pixels left and right. Okay. Great. So let's go back to here and we'll just say here, row, margin bottom 20 pixels, Actually, if not last child, give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels. Great. So now we got some spacing going on. We're also going to say something like, if there's a label inside of here, for the label, display block. Also make it text transform uppercase. And then also maybe a font size of like 11 pixels. Put that above there. And then give it also a font weight of, I think we have access to 600 for bold. Okay. And then also a color of, okay, so I actually went and checked, and this color is too light to be accessible. The contrast is just not enough. So let's go ahead and put this color in here. Normally I'd probably put it back as a variable, but for now I'll leave it here. So this will allow it to be accessible to the WCAG standards. I'm going to also add some letter spacing of 0.5 pixels. And then also, okay, so then I'm going to add some global input styling. So the input styling, we're going to say, let's say that it's a border of 0. Okay, no border. Border bottom of 2 pixels solid, and then we'll use that lightest color that we have. So now we got a border. Let's put that outline to nothing. None. Let me just put it in the focus. So when you're focusing, have no outline. Okay. And then we can actually say something like border color of primary, no accent. Okay. And so when you're focused, you got that accent color. Let's fix the width. So width, it's going to be 100%. Okay. And then I want to give it a padding. So a padding left of 5 pixels, a padding right of 5 pixels, and then to prevent this from going outside of the padding, you could change the box sizing, but we're just gonna say minus 10 pixels. Okay, so if we look at this, you can see that in the form row it doesn't exceed, but if we were to remove that 10 pixel and have it 100%, it exceeds right there. It exceeds the box. Okay, so one more thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to say if we got the valid input, so this is using HTML5 valid pseudocode, we're going to change the border color to the primary. And that's a little weird. I'll have to check and see why it's happening, but you can see if I put Gil and then tab, it will have green. This could be something about the placeholder. I'm not really sure. You can see that if I put an invalid number in it, it doesn't turn green. If I say play now, okay, so yeah, so that required field is being respected. Okay, great. Actually, let's go ahead and style this primary button. So let's hop over to buttons. Okay. And then let's just make a new one all the way on the top, and this will be the primary button styling. So we're going to give it a color of white. Okay. And then a background color of primary. We'll also give it some padding, something like 12 and 25 pixels. And then what else do we need? Uppercase it looks like, so text transform uppercase, maybe some letter spacing, 0.5 pixels. It seems to be the trend. Some border radius of like, I don't know, 2 pixels. Remove any outline that potentially could be there because it is a button. And then remove border. Okay. Font size looks a little large, so let's make it 12 pixels. And then move that up. Move these two down. Maybe increase the letter spacing to 1 pixel. Yeah, it looks a lot better. So, okay, so if we look at that. Let's look at the side by side. I think it looks pretty good. So let's give it a box shadow as well. So that box shadow is black. So I'll put it underneath all the way here. Box shadow. And then just, I think it's the same as, let's just copy this one. And then maybe increase it to like 0.2 or something. Whoa, so maybe a little too much. Yeah, so maybe 1.5. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then we need to give it some kind of like focus styling. So include hover, mix in. Why is that? Okay. So include hover, and then we'll just say something like transform scale 1.05, and then give it a transition so it does that nice and smooth. So now, if I spelt it right, if we hover over it, it kind of just increases a little bit. Let's see what 1.1 looks like. Yeah, sure. All right, so the last thing to do is style these expiration dates in the CVC, and then also this one right here. All right, so for the last, for that checkbox with the label, let's give it a modifier class of form list row dash dash agree. So we could use this later on if we were doing other forms, maybe something like, do you agree to the terms of service, like for the login page, for instance. So we'll do the agree, and then we'll hop over to forms, form row underneath label, and all of this. We'll say, actually, let's move this above, since this is modifying a pseudo element for row. Let's move this above label. So now we have this. We have agree. What do we want? Well, it looks like this is lowercase, not bold, slightly different color than the other labels, and then inline. So it's a couple things to change. First things first, let's the input width should be auto, not 100%, and that makes it inline. Now I think agree labels. Now we could style a label, and we're going to say text transform none. Font weight will go back to the regular 400, and then color will be just, let's inherit, or actually rather, let's make it see light, and then darken by like 20%. See what that looks like. 50%. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, and then also this gives us a margin right of 5 pixels. And I'm not going to style this custom to save some time, but I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit too dark, so maybe let's just say like, I think it was at 30%, 35%. Yeah, so that's fine. And then I'm gonna give it some margin bottom of like 30 pixels. Oop, not that much. 20 pixels. 10 pixels. Okay, I think that's good. So the last thing that we have is this row right here. So let's take a look at what we have. So we have the normal row, and then we have this inline. So let's call it here inline. And we have 2 divs inside of it. So we're going to display flex, and this will make it so it's these 2 are in line. So we know there's going to be 2 of them. So let's just style both individually. So first column, which is the first child, give it a width, or actually we'll use flex. So we'll say flex 2. So let's pretend there's 3 columns. We want this to take up 2 and this to take up 1. So now we can say and nth child 2n, the second one, we'll have a flex of 1. And then we'll give a padding right 20 pixels for the first one. And then we'll justify the content to be space between. Okay, and then this is not going to work actually, because I just realized that we're trying to target the first child and then the second one of the inline element of this instead of the child. So we'll say direct descendant first and then nth child. So now it will take on that styling. And then really the only other thing we have to do is, well, we have to do a couple things. We have to style this button. And then we've got to style these two columns here. So let's give these two that we had right here a helper class, and we can call it form list, and then it's not a row. Instead, it's going to be inline input, or actually we'll call it input inline. So there we go, inline, input inline, and input inline. We'll display flex again, and we'll also say space between because we're going to give it some margin. All right, so inside of here, input inline, star, really anything, so direct descendant, and then wildcard, whatever element it is, give it a width of, and we'll say 50% minus that 10 pixel padding that we had going on for all the elements, for all the inputs. We did all the way up here. If you look, we gave it 5 left, 5 right, and then we subtracted 10. So we have to resubtract 10 here to keep it consistent. And then we want to also take another 10 so that there'll be 20 pixels in between like we have with all the other elements. So we do that. Okay, so let's take a quick look, and this is actually inside of the row. So we want to move it outside one scope, and it will move that correctly. So now we've got that. And then the reason why this is actually like lower is because of this button right here. So we want to fix this up right now. So we gave it a class of button info. So let's style that now. So we'll scroll all the way down, do a new button styling of info, position it absolute, top of 0, right of 0. Okay. Oh, and it vanished because we need to go to the forms, find our label, and give it a position of relative so that it will, inside of this label, it will position this button relative to the label. So now it's there. And then for when you hover over it, we could just say something like opacity to 0.8, and then just transition that opacity 0.2 seconds. Oh, or opacity. Okay, all that's good. So I'm gonna hop over to the forms, go all the way up to the input, and give us a min height of 30 pixels. I think this gives it a little bit more spacing, some breathing room. So now if we look here, we're getting pretty close. I think we've pretty much done everything we needed to. And the only thing left is to style this outside box shadow and then do the credit card checker. So let's style the outside. And let's expand this a bit so we can see what we're working with. So we need to add some border radiuses and a box shadow. So we'll go back to the modal. And if you look here, let's look inside the Chrome inspector. So we have this modal, and then we have this modal container. So the modal container is what we want to style. So we'll go to modal container, and we'll just say border radius 4 pixels. We'll say 5. I think that's good. The reason why this is not having any border radius is because this is actually coming from that background that we did, circle. So what we can do is we can just say 5 pixels, okay. Where that background's getting applied, I think it's absolute. So we'll give it, a border top left radius of 5 pixels, and then a bottom left. Let's refresh that. Actually apply it to the parent, because this is actually getting, this right here is actually going to be applying it all the way out here because it's overflow hidden. So we can actually just go and hide that, remove that, and apply it to the parent circle. So you can see now it has that border. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to apply some box shadow to the container. So we'll say block shadow, and then this one we'll just put 5 pixels, uh, 20 pixels of spread, and then we'll say 0.1. Okay. So black with like 0.1 opacity. I mean, it's not exactly. You could probably actually just say something like 30 spread, something like that. So the last thing that we need to do now is the credit card number. So for the credit card type indicator, we're going to use this library by Braintree, and it's called credit card type. It's an NPM module, and what it allows us to do is it allows us to check when the user is entering a credit card number to check what type it is. If it's Visa, MasterCard, UnionPay, Maestro, whatever it is, it will let us know. And so I highly recommend using this module for checking credit card types. So in the terminal, I'm just going to exit gulp and then say npm install save to the dev list in the package JSON, and then just say credit card type. Okay, and then I can rerun gulp. So after rerunning gulp, you should be running everything the same. So now what we can do is we can actually go here. We can, let's see, we're going to close modal. We can close pretty much everything except for, let's leave forms open and then index, and then, let's bring back the sidebar. We're going to create a new file. So we're going to open up index, and we're going to say require, and then we're going to require cc type, and it'll be a ES6 JavaScript file. So we just crash gulp because this is actually not a real file yet. So let's create it. cc type.es6.javascript. And the reason why we're doing ES6 in there is because Webpack, if you open up the Webpack file, it's going to be looking for ES6 and then applying the Babel loader, which will allow us to do ES6. So inside this file, we're going to do import ES6 basically, import credit card type from, and then the npm module. So credit card type. And then we're going to create a listener on document, on the entire document, and then we'll say on input or change, and then it's going to be for this input for the credit card number. And actually, let's give it an ID to make it easier to target. So we'll give it an ID on the LI. So let's just say input of CC. So if there's a change on input CC, the actual input though, this on this inside of there, then hop into this function. So now we can just console log input change. Okay, and let's rerun gulp. So I actually forgot to do relative path, and then I reran gulp. It built. We can open up the inspector tools. Let's open up the console. Now, if I go into this number and I start typing, you can see it actually now registers, so the input changed. So now we can hook into this for credit card type. Okay, so back in our JavaScript file, we will create some new const variables. So we're going to say cc num, and then it'll be, since this is actually targeting the input, we can say this dot val will get the credit card value, and then we'll say const cc type equals credit card type cc num, and this is just a helper function for the library. You just pass in the credit card number and it'll give you the type. So now we can just console log cc num and then cc type, and I'll show you what that looks like. If you ever need any credit card test numbers, there's also a PayPal website that lists a bunch of the common credit card types and then the credit card numbers. So we're just going to grab one for American Express. We'll put this in here, and then you can see it returns an object, and that object is going to have a couple things. Mainly, the most important one is it's going to have a type. So that type will be really useful for us. So So we're going to hop back over here, and then we're just going to do some logic. So we want to just do a quick if, and we'll say if there is no CC num length. So if this value is empty, so we erased everything, let's say, because let's say we erased everything, it's going to register a change event. So we'll say, okay, if it's empty, or the type of CC type, you entered some number, it checked, and the input is not, there's an input, but it doesn't know what credit card number that is. Maybe it's a fake credit card. Maybe it's a number that we don't have in our system, or the CC type was returned and somehow there's no length. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say, just let's get out of here, return, and nothing will happen. Otherwise, we're going to say const credit card type, and it's going to be equal to the CC type. And since we're going to look for the first one and then dot type. Okay, and then I just created this helper object, and basically what this is going to let me, and let me actually do a const. So what this is it's going to map, it returns values like AE, MC, VI, DI, and I actually prefer like an English value. So I'm going to just map it like this. Okay, so we're actually going to take a pause and do some styling now, and the styling will display the credit card number type. Okay, so if we go over to here, we have an ID, but we also want to add a class, and this class is just going to be for a generic credit card type. So credit card icon, we'll start off with credit card icon, and then if the credit card icon is something like an Amex, we'll just append a modifier class and call it Amex, or let's say MasterCard, and so on. So this will just tell us, okay, give it a generic credit card icon type on this element. So if we go back to the CSS here, we can just do a new thing, call it, okay, ID input CC, position of relative, so it doesn't go outside of that. Let's give it a padding top of 6 pixels, and then target the input and say, okay, give it a left padding of 46 pixels. So I need to add one more dash. Okay, and so we're gonna have the icon display right here, not like the design which on the right. We'll display on the left, and then we need to change this width right here real quick. So we'll just say width calc 100% minus 46 pixels. So now it's and minus 10 pixels for the 5 pixels left and right padding. Actually 5 pixels for the right padding, and then 46 is the new left. So now it's in line. So now we can put the icon here, and when you type, it won't be hidden by the icon. So we can't style any before or after for the input. So instead we wrap it with this, we use the li wrapper, and we're gonna use the before pseudo element, and then we're gonna just put in the empty content, and then we're gonna position absolute, left of 0, top, and we're gonna center align it, vertically align it. So we're gonna use transform translate y this hack again. And then if we just do background color of red, and we need to give it a width and a height. So let's give it a width of 50 or 36 pixels, because we'll use, I think, SVG icons of 32. And then we'll give a height of 45 pixels. And I just realized my mistake. So the credit card number, we actually want to say, let's take all of this right here and only keep form list row, and then wrap the input in its own div. So that way we don't have the label, and the height and everything will be correct. So div ID input there, and then we remove the form list row and just keep it like that. So now this will be nice and centered. All right, so now what we can do is we need a couple things. Really, we need the background image, and that will be a SVG encoded, or an encoded SVG. So I'll have a link in the video description, but basically there's a code pen where you can enter the SVG code and it will encode it for a data URI. So this is what it looks like: a background image with a URL, data of image SVG plus XML, and then we can give it a UTF of 8, the content type. And then this is actually the SVG, but it's encoded now, so that can be viewed on any browser. And then if we save this, you'll see that this is the SVG, but it's way too big. So we'll give it a background size of the same as the width. So now that's good. And then we'll just say background position of centered. And then don't repeat this, just in case something goes wrong, don't repeat. So now it's centered vertically, and we can remove this background color. And now you can see when you land on the page, we had this credit card icon class. So by default, under the credit card icon class, it will just be styled as a credit card. But then what will happen is we'll go down here and we'll hook into that credit card icon class. So input type this, and then dot credit, what was it? Credit card icon. And then we'll use modifier classes. So, and then like American, let's see. So we had American Express, MasterCard, Visa, and Discover. So we'll append these to the end of the classes, and I'll show you in a second what it looks like. So I went ahead and grabbed the icons for each one. So you can see all I'm changing is the background image for Discover, for American Express, MasterCard, and then Visa. And if we were to go in here and then we add those icons ourselves, those classes, so credit card icon, and then we say credit card icon dash, let's say Visa, it changes it to a Visa. And I can also say American Express, and it changes that. So so all we're doing is changing the background image and keeping the rest of the styling, and basically overriding this property right here that is the default. So if we were to then in here where the classes are, remove the American Express and just keep the credit card icon, it's just going to be that. And even if we remove that, it's nothing. But we're going to use this for JavaScript. So great. So now what we can do is, since we have all the styling, we can go back to the JavaScript, and then we can hook into the JavaScript, the styling for the JavaScript. Okay, so really all we need to do now is swap some classes. So we're going to say select the input CC div, and then so it's going to be this. We're going to say remove all the classes. And the reason for that is if there was an American Express card, we don't want to have American Express and Visa. There'll be like conflicting images. So we're going to remove every class there. Since the default class and all of them don't rely on this class, it's just there for like hooking into. We'll remove all of them, and then we'll add the specific class that we need. And this is going to be credit card icon dash dash, and then we'll say plus the credit card type that. So actually import credit card type. Let's just say CC type found. All right, so then once we have all of that, if we were to go back to the form and we start clicking any of these, 6, and then 9, 8, looks like it's not 3, so 3, 2, 6, 5, 4, 1, 1, 3. Yeah, and then when you subtract, and it shows the default credit card icon. So I think that's about it. Thanks for watching. Again, like always, feel free to create a PR if there's any bugs in the code you find. And feel free to suggest in the comments anything you want to see in the future from this channel. Thanks, and see you next week.